All right, Cristina
Hello.
Azzopardi Schellmann.
Very good.
Welcome to the
That's perfect.
Bartcast.
Thank
So
you
good
for
to,
having me.
yeah, it's so good to have you on here. I've done now, I think two podcasts with people that I met in Costa Rica. So
Oh, that's very cool.
I'm stoked to have you on this one. Thank you so much for coming on. And
Of course. Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast experience.
really,
Yeah.
well, you're doing great already. You're a
Okay.
natural.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, um, as I just said, you're speaking to me from Costa Rica. Can
Yes.
you give my listeners just a little bit of context about where you're at, what you do, what your role is there, Alturas Wildlife Rescue Center? Because I think that would be a cool place to start.
Yeah, of course. So, as you said, this is Alturas Wildlife Center, Rescue Center, Sanctuary, a little bit of everything. And we are located in Costa Rica on the Pacific coast, 7 kilometers south of a small little surf town called Dominical. We've been working for about 7 years. We've been established for about 7 years. Basically, our aim and our goal, what we do is we rescue any wild animal that's injured, confiscated, or orphaned. And our aim is to rehabilitate them or raise them and send them back into the wild. We have a fully equipped vet clinic on site and a full-time vet staff. So any kind of procedures, physiotherapy, acupuncture, everything's kind of done on site. And of course, sometimes animals are not releasable for a number of different reasons. So we also have a wildlife sanctuary. So that's where we offer them or provide the animals with refuge for the rest of their lives, the animals that can't be released. So primarily we have a lot of animals that have come from the pet trade. So in Costa Rica since 2012, it's actually illegal to have any native wild animal as a pet. So like 90% of the animals we have in our sanctuary were previously kept as pets, like all types of monkeys, parrots, and most of them in pretty bad conditions. And because they have been probably born in captivity or just have spent their whole life in captivity, they wouldn't really survive in the wild. And some of them have like paralyzed limbs or neurological disorders or just like aggression towards humans so that you can't release them because they would try to kill any person they see. And so what we do is, yeah, we kind of manage these two different centers on site over here. The main reasons why we get animals, the number one reason is road traffic accidents, unfortunately. We are located in a part very close to, it's called a biological corridor, so where we connect the north of the country to the south. And so there's so much wildlife here. It's in crazy amount of diversity. But unfortunately, having this big highway running through it, we get a lot of animals that are hit by cars. We also get a lot of electrocutions, which is probably something you guys don't really have the issue with in the States. Over here, the electricity lines are not insulated. So a lot of animals that climb, like sloths or monkeys, will use these electricity lines to get from one side to the other, but they're not insulated, so they get pretty badly electrocuted. We get a lot of pets, so people taking animals from the wild and keeping them as pets, and then these are confiscated. And quite a few domestic animal attacks. Actually, dogs and cats are the cause for a lot of species, wild species, to go extinct. So, for example, if a sloth climbs down a tree to take a nice poop, and that's like the perfect time for someone's dog to run, attack it, and kill it or injure it. So we get actually a lot of those kind of cases. And the only case we get that's not anthropogenically caused, which means that's not affected by humans, is just orphans. So a mother, if she sees that her young is sick or there's something wrong with it, she's just going to naturally reject it and abandon it, which sounds really harsh, but it's all about survival of the fittest. Her leaving her young behind is just food for another animal. And of course, we don't want to interfere with nature, but if people come across, like a baby sloth on the side of the road and they bring it to us, we're not going to say like, oh, this is natural, just take it back there and leave it to die. So we do have a lot of animals that we've actually raised or we have here in our sanctuary that have birth defects, have neurological issues, because they were meant to be just left out and they were meant to be food for other animals, but obviously people interfered and brought them to us. So that's a little bit of an overview of us. What I do here is I've been working here for the past 4 years. I actually arrived with a 6-month contract and I just never left. It just kind of stuck with me. But I'm in charge of the volunteer and the internship program. So I'm the program manager here. We have a very small group of staff, like permanent staff members. The majority of the work is done by volunteers and interns. So anyone from anywhere in the world can come and live with us for a week to 3 months, and we train them according to our policies and procedures, and they help us with the daily care of the animals. And then I also provide internships for like vet people, like in vet school or who are studying conservation, to come here to also get like hands-on experience. And we do lectures and workshops, and they also have the opportunity to work on, to carry out independent research. So it's kind of like they're helping us with the work, but they also get a lot of experience which they would need to go out into to work further in that field of study.
Awesome. A worthy cause.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, how did you get into this kind of work? Like how is it that you found yourself at the wildlife sanctuary with your 6-month contract?
Well, I studied in the UK. I have a master's in wildlife conservation. I have my bachelor's in earth science. And the first day of the master's in the UK, the dean of the course said, okay, the best place any of you can hope to work with wildlife is in Costa Rica, because apart from obviously immense diversity, the government here puts a lot of emphasis on the protection of wildlife. And whilst in other countries, you obviously do have great amount of diversity, but it's always a bit of a struggle with trying to get things put through. But here we do have a lot of help from the government, not financial help, but you know, they're the ones that are going and confiscating animals and bringing them to us. So I came here just to get some work experience. I was doing some research with sea turtles, with sloths, and then someone I actually went to university with was working here and she wanted to leave. So she posted and I was like, oh, I'll just try it out. And I came here and just kind of stayed on. I never really left.
What got you into, you know, animal conservation in the first place? Has this always been something you've been interested in? And I'm curious how that story started.
I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, I never really, since I was young, I never really knew what I wanted to do in my life. I wasn't one of those people that was like, yes, I'm going to be an engineer or a doctor. I never really had a like sure vision in my head. I, of course, always loved animals, but I'm from Malta, which is a very tiny island in the Mediterranean. We don't have much animals or much wildlife. So it wasn't something that I was always surrounded with. I went into university in Malta then, and I took part in this course that had just opened up called Earth Science, which was a very broad course on different aspects. We were studying soil and oceanography and like a lot of random different environmental topics. And one of the topics was conservation. And somehow I was just drawn to it. I was like, well, this is really interesting. And after I finished my bachelor's, I took some time off. I took about a year off and I traveled a lot of Central America, some countries in Asia and Africa, and I did a little bit of volunteering here and there, and I just fell in love with the concept of trying to do good, trying to make up for all the bad that's going on in the world. And then so after that, I just applied to some different courses in university. Then I got into the master's in the University of Bristol. And yeah, it was a very full-on conservation related course, and it was great. I learned a lot, and part of that we had to do our thesis. And I always loved elephants. There was something about elephants that I was always been drawn to. So I had no plan what to do for my thesis, and I was like, okay, I just want to do something with elephants, which is pretty hard to do in England because, you know, they don't have elephants.
Yeah.
But through contacts, I eventually went to Thailand, but I was living in a very small community called the Karen tribe, very close to the Myanmar border. And I was working there with an English NGO. What they were trying to do was basically ecotourism. So kind of like how you go to Africa and you go on a safari, you pay money and you go out into the bush and you see wildlife from afar and you don't stress them out, you don't touch them or ride them, but you're just able to observe them and respect them from afar. This charity I was working with was trying to establish this tourism model in Thailand. So basically they were taking all the elephants that they were using for tourism. So, you know, a lot of people go to Asia to ride elephants or to go to circuses. And so they were taking the elephants and their mahouts, which are basically their elephant owners, back into the jungle where actually the elephant owners are from, where they can be with their family. And people would come for 3 days, hike into the jungle with the mahouts, watch the elephants from afar, just a very simple ecotourism model. So I was there for a few months and I was studying the behavior. It was a very new concept. So I was studying how the elephants were reacting with the presence of tourists and when they were in there, and seeing if tourist presence had any impact on them, good or bad. And then, yeah, that's kind of where it all started. That's when I really got like my first hands-on experience. And then from then I always had this dream to come to Costa Rica, and everything kind of just fell into place.
That's awesome. And living with elephants sounds like they seem like one of those animals where, because there's such a high level of intelligence and personality, I could see that really being like a journey of like self-discovery and reflection as well. Curious, like if you had any, if that provided you with any insights about your own humanity or your own role in this world, getting to be with these majestic creatures.
Yeah. Wait, is this a question or?
I guess, yeah. I mean, like, did that kind of change your perspective on what it means to be human, being with these elephants?
I guess you could say that for sure. I definitely gained more respect for them, and realize that you just honestly living there and living in the middle of nowhere, you just realize how little you actually need in life to survive and to be happy, especially living not just with the elephants, but amongst the village people. They have so little, and that's really all you really need in life. So I think it was more not from the animal perspective, but more the experience as such, and really changed me. And I not that I was very consumerist before, but I'm very anti-consumerism now. I try to live with as little as possible, and that was definitely where the journey began, because I had to live with so little there for a few months, and then that kind of made an effect.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about like the effects of capitalism on conservation. One of the things I've heard that I know is like a controversial topic kind of, and it's not as straightforward as one might originally think, getting back to what you were mentioning in Africa with these big parks, these private, parks where people come and they do safaris, or you have like the big hunting parks. Nobody wants to see like a picture of a hunter with a rifle with a dead lion, or these like megafauna that they're hunting. But I've heard that like that's also strangely like what is key in some ways protecting these animal populations, because there's so much poaching, there's so much like black market trade, that in some ways like the commercialized hunting of these animals is like ensuring that there's a living population. I know that's kind of a complicated topic. There's definitely lots of emotions around it, and people have very strong opinions, but I'm curious what your opinion is of that whole
industry. I mean, that's like a big topic on ethics and what's right and wrong. And actually in university we had a lot of debates on this subject, because there's different kinds. Like there's canned hunting, right, where the animals are actually bred in captivity and people pay like a bunch of money to come and shoot the animals. And then there is for example, again, I'm going to take the example of elephants. If you have a really old bull, which is the male elephant, that is the bull in charge. You know, he's not going to let any of the other males breed, but he's old, he can't reproduce anymore. What some conservation programs do is that they're, I guess you're interfering with nature, right? So this is where my issue lies, is that people have to always kind of manage and handle things, and that's what my issue with the problem is. But basically, certain programs will say, okay, there's going to be people that want to shoot wildlife whether we want it or not, so why don't we like make money off of something that has to be done anyway? So actually they'll get people that will pay a lot of money to shoot the male bull, like I'm talking about thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And with that money, they can use to create better fencing for anti-poaching campaigns. So they use that money for conservation, but it's very, it's like, I don't know. I have a little bit of issue with this, but of course, I'm also not in the situation where I'm not working in a center where we're really like desperate for money that we have to jeopardize the animals, even though, you know, the animals are probably going to die anyway. I'm not totally for that. Well, I'm not for that at all. But I do understand where it comes from in that sense. But then if you talk about canned hunting, just making money from animals that have been literally in captivity their whole life, I don't see how that is okay. I mean, that's just a whole lot, many issues on ethics, my personal opinion, right?
Right. Yeah, it's complex, right? Because we would all immediately, like, I would assume immediately, right, that like going and killing like a lion or you know, going and just going for a trophy, you know, I think, you know, there you could make an argument if you're hunting to support your family, to feed, you're using the animal. I think that there's an argument there, especially if you're coming from a culture where that's part of your tradition. But you know, it gets more complicated when you are like thinking about, you know, what it's like on the ground in a real world context. It's not there's no perfect solution. It's not like that this is necessarily, you know, a fully positive thing, but the irony is that that imperfect system in this modern kind of capitalist exploited worlds might be the only thing right now that's keeping these fragile populations alive. And I think that kind of can be more complicated than people might first
exactly
observe.
There's always so much more to the story than the surface.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things when I was, you know, when I was traveling in Costa Rica and where I met you, I was on the, before I came to Dominical, I was on the Caribbean side and ended up visiting the Jaguar Center in Puerto Viejo. And when we did the tour, you know, learned about the power lines, learned about, you know, the effects of basically humanity on these populations. And one of the things that really shocked me was how large the number of animals were that they were getting in like every week. You know, I was thinking maybe a couple a month, like this, but they were getting like, you know, large numbers in like almost every week. I'm curious at your center, what, you know, how many animals come in? Do you see coming in every week? What do those numbers look like in Dominical?
Yeah, I mean, we are one of the busiest centers in the country. We get on average at least one animal a day on average. There's days like yesterday we got 4 animals in. Today so far we've only gotten 1, a hawk. It's a constant thing. And it's always like Murphy's Law. There's always going to be a day when we get 6, 7 animals, and there might be another day where there's absolutely nothing. And this is of course all the work on top of caring for the animals we already have. We have about in total about 75 individuals right now in the whole center, like including sanctuary and the rehab. But yeah, we get quite a lot. The number one reason why we get animals is the pet trade. It is the confiscations, and out of all the animals, it's parrots that we get the most. Just because I think because of the amount of years they live, and if you look at a scarlet macaw, for example, which is the largest parrot species we have here on the Pacific, and they can live up to 70 years old. So a lot of these animals was probably legal to have them before, and then when everything changed, this is why we're getting a lot of confiscations, and we actually don't have space to accept any more parrots. So we'll take them in, we'll obviously care for them, treat them, and then we transfer them to other centers where they do have space for them, just because we are at full capacity in our sanctuary.
Yeah, and how many animals are permanent residents of your sanctuary?
Mm-hmm. We have about 35 permanent residents. There's obviously every now and then we add a new one. But for the most part, like I said, we try to release all the ones that we believe are releasable. So in the sanctuary, we have a few monkeys of different species of monkeys, squirrel monkeys, spider monkeys, and capuchins. Sloths, peccaries. We have an ocelot, which is one of the wild species of cat here. A crocodile, a lot of parrots, anteaters. Yeah, a little bit of everything, really.
What's the in your experience, like, what are the most like labor intensive to take care of and maintain? Is there a particular species where it's like, oh, that's the really tough one, or these ones are really easy to work with? Or
I mean, I'd definitely say birds. Birds are like very messy animals. They're also extremely intelligent. So apart from just cleaning and feeding them every day, we do a lot of emphasis on enrichment here. So enrichment are like items we give to the animals to keep them primarily mentally stimulated, but also physically stimulated. So something simple enrichment related that we do is we never just give the animals a plate of food. We'll take their food and like climb around the enclosure and hide it in different places so that they have to fly around to find it. Or we'll do like puzzle feeders or hide boxes. And yeah, because parrots are so intelligent, we try to do a lot of extra enrichment for them. But they're just very messy, loud birds. I don't understand how people want them as pets. But they're definitely, and they have attitude, if they don't like you, they're going to let you know they don't like you, and they'll fly on your head and try to peck at your feet. So they're the ones, especially I can talk about in terms of work related, that like the volunteers a lot of them are scared to go in with the parrots because they are so intense.
they got those big knives on their face,
Oh yeah, exactly. And they can smell fear, so when there's someone who's like a little bit timid, they'll know that that's the one they need to harass the most. But otherwise all the others are pretty calm. Capuchin monkeys are they do it just to like mess with us, right? So obviously we try to clean very well because we don't have a dirty enclosure that's going to attract rodents and ants. So the capuchins, we give them like quite a diverse diet, and one of the things we give them are red peppers, like the raw red pepper. And the capuchins will literally peel the skin of the red pepper into little pieces, drop it everywhere, and then they'll just eat the inside. So that's like fun with all the cleaning, and it takes quite time consuming.
Yeah. I'm curious what like on average, what percentage of animals that you see coming in are able to be fully rehabilitated and released back into the wild versus animals that have to end up being permanent residents or move to other sanctuaries?
If you don't take the confiscated animals into consideration, because majority of the time with a confiscated animal, they're not going to be able to be released unless they're really young and they haven't been with people for that long. So if you don't consider those, about 60% of the animals we receive we release. So we have about a 60% rate. Of course, we deal with death a lot of times, which people don't really understand. A lot of people are used to domestic animals like your dog and your cat, but we take this approach, which is called conservation medicine. So if we're going to have a monkey that comes in electrocuted really badly in its leg, we know that they cannot survive in the wild, for example, because it's a crucial part of their limb that they can't use to climb. And we don't want to have the animals the animals we have in our sanctuary are there because we think that they can have a good value of life, good quality of life, even though they are in captivity. So if we have, for example, this monkey that we know can't move, or for example, a raptor with permanent wing trauma that it can never fly again, we're not just going to keep it in the sanctuary just for the sake of having it as a fun animal. And in those cases, we do tend to resort to euthanasia. Also, just being able to grab a wild animal means that they're already so weak and so sick. So bringing them here, they're already kind of on their last limb. They're not like dogs and cats. They don't like people. They don't want to be around us. So the fact that some random person in the street sees, an injured monkey and is able to grab it and bring it to us, we already know that it's generally not going to make it because it is so weak and so injured. So we deal a lot with death, but the ones that miraculously do make it, we have about a 60% release rate, more so with mammals than I would say with birds. Birds are very sensitive, and we don't get too many reptiles, not because Costa Rica doesn't have that many reptiles. There's an incredible amount of quantity of different species, but it's because of charisma. So the majority of animals we're getting are rescued by just people in the street that come across them. And people are, of course, more inclined to rescue a bird or a mammal than they are to rescue a snake or a crocodile.
I'm guessing
so
you're not getting a ton of vipers.
No, well, yeah, no. But no, exactly. And we get actually a lot of injuries with snakes, people like trying to machete them, trying to actually cut them. Recently, we just released her. We got a caiman that was attacked by a human, like literally prodded with a metal stake. They were trying to kill her. And then it was all happening very close to the house of our biologist, and he managed to get her in, and she was in recovery for quite a few weeks, but actually last week they just released her. So it was a happy story.
For those of you out there that don't know what a caiman, and it's like a small crocodile, right?
Yeah.
I know. I learned about that when I visited Belize.
Yeah.
And we went to the Belize Zoo, and they were telling us all about the caiman, and super cool place.
Yeah, they're like a cuter, small version of a crocodile. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. The charisma factor. Is that how most animals come in? Is that just people find them and bring them into you? Is that like the majority of the ones that you get?
Yeah, the people, the police will bring animals in. And how Costa Rica works is there's this organization, it's a government branch called the MINAE, MINAE, stands for a lot of different things. So they are the legal representative that they work with anything to do with the environment, whether it's plants, animals, wildlife. So they will, for example, when we go to rescue an animal, because we also go to rescue if someone calls and says, oh, there's this animal, we have like a jurisdictional area that we can collect animals from. If it's outside of that area, the MINAE or we'll call them, and then they'll go pick the animal up and then bring them to us. So it's probably half, like half them, and then the other half is between us and just Good Samaritans, we call them. So just people that find animals and bring them to us.
That's awesome. I mean, that's like one of the things that I was struck by visiting Costa Rica was, every country has its problems and its corruption. I know Costa Rica is no exception, but
yeah,
just visiting a country that doesn't have a standing military. I think I heard the other fact was 98% renewable energy. And then to hear that you have a police force that's protecting animals or helping animals is another example of the country's ethos, which I think is, it's a beautiful thing. And I definitely experienced that visiting, that most of the people that I met, most of the native Costa Ricans had this very environmentally conservationist mindset. I think most people seem to have a really strong connection in their minds between Costa Rica's economic status as a tourist destination and the necessity of protecting the natural beauty, the natural resource of the country. And I think more so than a lot of places, really linking in their mind how important for their own economy it is to make sure that this place stays wild and this place stays protected. And you hear about, you look on the map in Costa Rica and it's like there's like one highway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
West. Most of it is like wild, inaccessible terrain that's just rainforest. And you don't see that a lot in the modern world with a lot of countries.
No, exactly. And unfortunately, it is changing a little bit. And I worry that in, the next 10, 20 years, it is going to be just like a lot of other countries. But yeah, it's incredible, like to go from one side of the country to the other. It's only a few kilometers apart, but you have to go all the way to San Jose, which is the capital city, cross over. It's like an 8-9 hour trip, when if you technically just cut across, you could be there in like what, an hour or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a good thing, that they aren't putting infrastructure before environment, at least for now, we hope.
Yeah, I definitely had to shake some of my Western sensibilities about, I was getting frustrated when I was like, what,
Yeah.
this is a 50-mile trip. Why is it going to take me 4 hours?
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
I'm sure you've experienced this. Like, I grew up in a small town in the pretty rural area, pretty nature. And it was just a slower life. And I think that like, that's actually really good for the psychology to, I live in a city. I'm used to like fast pace, go, go, go. And there's something to be said for the psychology that arises when you have to get a little more slow yourself down, get a little more in touch with
exactly.
natural world and nature. And that's something I really appreciated about being in Costa Rica.
Yeah, for sure.
Tico time.
It's very special. Tico time and Pura Vida life. Everything is like, oh yeah, eventually.
Yeah, and it makes for, I think, a greater level of happiness and satisfaction when
Yeah, and just slow down, relax. You don't have to speed through life.
Yeah. I'm curious, can you explain what is the pipeline like for an animal that comes into your sanctuary, from like the moment they arrive to, let's say, like take me through like arrival to release? Like what does that process look like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it depends a lot on the animal. So we get a baby, a nursery animal, and we would first obviously receive it. It always goes through checkups. If it's just because it is abandoned and there's nothing actually wrong with it, or like physically wrong with it, then we have a specific building that's our nursery. So this is where we have incubators, heat pads. It's like a very zen place for little babies to be. And this is a big part of the vet internship. So the interns are trained to basically care for the babies around the clock. So just like human babies, they're being fed throughout the day and throughout the night. So there's always somebody at night feeding the babies just depending on what species we have, every 2 to 4 hours, and waking up throughout the night. Once they pass like the very initial week phase, we'll start taking them out of the nursery, so into our rehab center. So they'll be out just to get sun, fresh air, start like feeling natural life. And so they might just be out for a few hours. We put them back inside for the nighttime. Also keep in mind that it's Costa Rica, it rains like crazy here sometimes. So if we have a really weak young animal, we can't leave it outside because it can get pneumonia really easily. You can actually just die from being cold. So it's a very slow process we have to do. Once it kind of does this like a little bit during the day, and at nighttime it's back inside, it gets a little bit older. Eventually it stays permanently in the rehab center in an enclosure, depending on the species it is. If it's a nocturnal animal, for example, which are animals that are only awake at nighttime, we wouldn't do anything with it during the day. We just leave it be, and then at night people are also feeding it and caring for it. Once it passes the rehab stage, so they're old enough, we know that they're able to eat by themselves, they can move around well. And a lot of what we do, especially in our rehab center, is very zero contact. We only have like a few people that are working with the animals. We don't have tours that come and see the animals. We have limited contact as much as possible. We try that the animals don't see us. because a big issue that we deal with babies is something called imprinting, where they assume that because we're feeding them and caring for them that we are their mothers, which sounds really cute and amazing, but it's not. And the moment an animal is attached to us, they can't be released because they will go to humans either for food, and then people might take them and keep them as a pet, or they might not want their attention and they might shoot them or poison them or harm them in any way. So we really need to make sure that these animals are not attached to us in any way, and we do that by having as limited contact as possible. So when they're in the enclosures and we want to see how they're behaving, we use a lot of camera traps, which is, I have one right here to show you. So it looks like a fun little camera. And basically it's kind of like a CCTV camera, but not, it doesn't play all the time. It's just activated with movement. And so we put these cameras, and like that, we're able to watch them, how they're eating, how they're moving, without us physically standing there and affecting their behavior. So sorry, I went a bit off track, but yeah, anyway. So after the rehab section, once we think that they're probably independent enough, we send them down into the jungle. We have larger enclosures that are further away from us, and those are what we call our pre-release. And that's kind of the last stage before they're released. They're bigger enclosures, so if it's a bird, for example, they can fly more. If it's a monkey, they can climb more. And there we're doing like we're literally just going there, popping in food and leaving them, making sure they obviously have fresh water. And this is kind of like the last stage to really get them ready for life in the wild. So even like food we're giving them is going to be big, raw, nothing. They have to, we need to be sure that they're able to identify what they need to eat. And this is where we also do these kind of tests to see if the animals are releasable. And obviously every single animal is going to be different. If you have a squirrel, for example, squirrel is like one of the biggest prey items here. We need to make sure that they can identify what's a predator, so smell, sound. And we need to know that if they do see a predator, how do they react? You know, if a snake all of a sudden enters the enclosure, do they jump up high, or do they just avoid it, or do they just like stare at it? If it's a prey, sorry, that was prey. If it's a predator, like if we have a cat in rehab, for example, we need to make sure that it's able to hunt successfully, because otherwise we're just throwing a cat out and it's going to die of starvation. So it's very species specific. And then we release the animal. Generally, we always try to release them from the area they've come from. So whenever we intake an animal, there's a lot of paperwork we do to like keep track of everything. Sometimes we get an animal like the caiman from a very unsuitable habitat. So the caiman was found very close to people's houses. So of course, we're not going to release it back there. So we do a lot of surveying of different lands to see if it's an available, suitable release site. And again, we use these camera traps to see if there's more of the same species. Of course, if it's a species that's very territorial, we can't release like a male into another male's territory. So there's so many different factors that come into place, and it's not just a one-person job saying, yes, this animal is releasable or not. It's generally all the staff. We have like weekly meetings. Sometimes we don't because we're busy, but we try to have weekly meetings, and we like, it's a group effort saying if this animal is releasable or not. If it's like an adult, like today we got in an injured hawk. Obviously first we receive it, we're checking it out in the clinic. Generally the animal will stay in the clinic for a few days or weeks and under intensive care, depending on how bad they are. And this animal is going to be medicated every day, probably has to have physiotherapy done to it. And it's easier to keep it in a restrained space than in an enclosure where you have to run around every day trying to catch the animal to give it a little bit of antibiotics. But once it's past the clinic phase, the same thing, then it's moved to the rehab and eventually pre-released and then eventually released.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, one of my goals with this podcast, or with a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I had this dream, you know, a few years ago, pre-pandemic. You know, I'm a big traveler.
Mm-hmm.
I love, you know, one of my big goals in life is to see as much of the world as I can. And I realized that for a lot of young people, especially in this country, you know, when I was growing up, you know, the idea is like you go to college, you go to university right out of high school, start your career, figure out who you are as a person somewhere along the way. I know a lot of people in this country kind of go through the motions, and your rite of passage or your coming of age, for a lot of people in our culture is like comes when you get your job, when you get your career started. That's like a big part of how people try to define who they are, and I think that there's an aspect of that that doesn't always lead to like the deepest satisfaction with your life. You see a lot of people with, midlife crises, realizing they spent 20 years of their life doing something they're not really into, they're not really activated
Yeah.
by. So, and I know that in the modern world, at least in the United States, college is becoming less and less, what's the word? I think it's less and less of an advantage to have a college degree, university degree in this country.
Yeah.
Of course, there's still going to be fields that are specialized, the hard sciences, different, there are things that need certification, specialization, but I think for a lot of young people, there's this hunger to kind of figure out like, well, who am I? What do I care about? What are my values? And I know for myself, travel has been a huge teacher in my life of discovering like, what do I actually care about? What is the gift that I want to share with the world? What am I meant to be doing? How am I going to be happy? How am I going to make my passion a sustainable one? How do I support myself? So with all that in mind, I have this dream of producing a podcast and like a video channel, that kind of documents as I go around the world. Basically me going around and discovering or shedding light on different places for people to visit, to kind of build meaning into their lives, almost like a buffet of options for the 18 to 21-year-old who is excited about some things but doesn't really know what they want to do, and who has never traveled before but who is interested in it. And I know like when you first start traveling can be a bit overwhelming. Where do I go? What do I do? There's so many options. It's a whole world out there. And so what I'd like to provide is like, hey, here's a whole, series of examples of places that you can go and volunteer or work or study or meditate, or, there's so many different cool programs out there. I really want to give people an opportunity to, to make it easier, especially with Americans. Most of us never leave this country. I think it would really benefit ourselves and the world to have more worldly people in this country. So all that being said, to me, this episode with you, where I've been thinking about it is it's a great example of a program that people who are interested in learning more about the world, learning more about nature, learning more about themselves. This seems like one of those great options that people can go and dedicate their time to a cause that's bigger than themselves. And I just wanted, this is all to like speak to the question, to talk about your area of expertise, which is this volunteer program. Can you talk a little bit about that and the types of people that you look for, how people can get involved, and what that whole experience is like?
Yeah, of course. So we basically, like I said at the beginning, we have people from literally all over the world come to volunteer with us. There's like the volunteering program and the internship program that are slightly different. The volunteering program, you don't have to have any kind of animal experience. You just have to be over 18 years old, because we are dealing with dangerous animals. So we can't work with kids, unfortunately. And minimum of 1 week of volunteering, maximum of 3 months. But basically as a volunteer, and also depending on your level of experience, some people come here that have previously worked in sanctuaries. Some people, like, this is literally their first animal experience and they've never done anything before with animals. So we can kind of accept all kinds of backgrounds. And yeah, depending on how long you can stay for, You're going to be trained to work in that with the animals in the sanctuary and the rehab side. So every day there's a certain amount of kind of repetitive work, which is the cleaning side of things. So a lot of poop picking, old food picking. Then we present the food, so like hiding the food around, doing enrichment. We build a lot of enrichment things, feeding the animals. We do go to collect a lot of wild foods, so going to the beach and collecting beach almonds from these trees that grow by the beach, or specific wild leaves, or termites' nests for the anteaters. So it's definitely physical, hands-on, you're going to get sweaty kind of work. You'll also be trained in the animal kitchen, so you have to do all the diet preps, which is super interesting, at least in my opinion. You get to learn a lot about nutrition and supplementation, and what one animal needs is very different from what another one needs. So that's a super cool part. Just general maintenance, so like fixing enclosures. We're in a very humid country, so everything kind of rots very quickly, breaks down. So all the animals have like perches in their enclosures, green things that we call browse, which are like bushes and branches. So these constantly have to be replaced, fixed. So there's that aspect to it. And then just being here, you get to be exposed to all the rescues and releases. So anytime we're called for a rescue, they'll come with us and just be there. Of course, the same with releases. Anything that's going on clinic related, they're allowed to observe and watch. So it's kind of like a lot, but it's a little bit of everything. And we just hope that people do go away with being more conscious about our actions, being more aware about what we do and our effect on the wildlife, and on not just wildlife, the environment as well, And then our interns, on the other hand, so we have wildlife husbandry internship and vet internships. The vet interns are, of course, for people that are studying to be vets or vet techs. And the wildlife husbandry ones are those who are studying like conservation, like myself, or zoology. And we get a lot of students that come from universities, and they need to carry out a certain amount of weeks of practicals. So you're going to be helping with all aspects of the sanctuary, but they're given much more responsibility. So these are the people that are going to be helping to feed the babies at night. They all work on independent research projects. So if they're studying something in university or in college that they're really interested in and they want to get more experience with, then they can have the opportunity to do that here. We give them all the equipment they need. We do a lot of like lectures and workshops. So it's more like school related in that sense. They have certain criteria they have to fill and complete. But with both programs, it's definitely a lot of hands-on work and a lot of you're just exposed to so many different animals. We're not like a sanctuary just accepts one species. We literally take everything. So you're going to get to learn a lot about the different animals that we have here and the different issues that we have to deal with. And yeah, apart from that, like we understand that a lot of people are also here on holiday. So they're not working every single day from 7 to 3. There's certain days in between the day shift. We'll take them to like nearby waterfalls and beaches and local markets. And then also after work, like doing like sunset surfing times and yeah, just going somewhere to watch like the sunset together. So it's like a balance between work, but also you are on vacation at the end of the day and you want to go out and experience the country and the nearby area.
Yeah, I think the night I met you, you were kind of leading a group of, was it interns or volunteers? I got a sense that you guys have a really family aesthetic in the
Yeah, exactly.
program. Can you talk a little bit about what the culture is like at the center and what it's like, as a leader, how do you think about building that sense of community with the people that come?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're very right. It is very communal based. The volunteers do live on site here, and I personally don't live on site anymore. But we have volunteer coordinators and an assistant that does. So everybody shares the same housing space. We have a cook who makes all our lunches and dinners. So we have like a big dining area, and everybody eats together. And some people are here for 3 months, which is a long time. And they might be their first time traveling away from home. So you get like also some people that form really strong friendships and bonds, and we've dealt with a lot of people that cry when they leave because obviously you've been here for such a long time.
Yeah.
But we try to yeah, where they're literally involved in all aspects of everything we do. And then the fact that we also socialize with them and go out with them, it gives us like good sense of yeah, definitely community.
What's the
And I'm
word?
sure, sorry.
No, you go, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I'm sure you experience it here because the Costa Rican culture in general is very friendly and welcoming. You know, you would never go to anybody's house, and the first thing they do is they offer you food and make sure you're comfortable. And apart from myself, everybody else who works here is Costa Rican, and you can definitely feel that sense. Like our cook is like our grandmother. She's like, she's very young, but she's like
Mhm.
feeding us all the time, and there's always like cakes and everything around. So there's definitely that nice sense of home feeling.
Yeah, I was really moved by the the Costa Rican culture. I feel like kind of what I observed as an armchair anthropologist, you know, when I
Mhm.
went there was like, here's this country of, it's a country that decided that, look, we're going to build, I think I met a Costa Rica, they were telling me like in the 60s, the country like as a whole kind of made this move towards a tourism based economy. And, you know, you go to some countries and there's you know, especially as like a first world Westerner coming into another culture, there's a lot of countries you go to and it feels like there's kind of an exploitation taking place, or that it's kind
Mhm.
of a, you're entering into this other country and a lot of the people are isolated from the benefits of that tourism or of that you know, movement of people. And for myself personally, like that can be a difficult reality to, you know, to struggle with, or to be aware of. When I went to Costa Rica, I didn't really get that feeling. Like I felt like most people I met were aware of and welcoming of that dynamic.
Mhm.
It felt a lot more balanced as far as like uh the locals participating in tourism, the visitors coming in. You know, I
Mhm.
was learning about how much um you know, the government provides training, there's job opportunities. It seems
Mhm.
like a much more consensual and mutually beneficial dynamic relative to some other countries. I know
Mhm.
that there's a very high standard of living relative to a lot of Central America and Costa Rica. It's one of the most wealthy countries in the region.
Mhm.
And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and the effects of that like uh, that philosophy, if you will, you know, I really was surprised and delighted by how kind of open-minded everybody is as a result. There's so many
Yeah.
different people coming through that there's this like beautiful mix of ideas and backgrounds and philosophies that like everybody kind of is open to learning about, you know, different thoughts or different ways of thinking. And
Mhm.
I think that that's a huge benefit to anybody, you know, looking to experience another culture. What a beautiful culture to get to come and, you know, and
Yeah,
participate.
exactly. Yeah, for sure. I just came back last week and I was visiting another Central American country and everything was nice, but I was like, yeah, you don't feel as at home there. Like, you know, the people like don't really want you there kind of. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh,
right.
I miss Costa Rica as soon as I arrived back. But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with tourism, and Costa Ricans understand that unfortunately they do need tourism to survive. And whilst all Central American countries really do, but over here the people actually treat you very nicely, right? The majority, and they're very thankful and grateful, and they also have so much to offer, and they're so interesting, and the stories that you can hear from them and learn from them are just very, yeah, you just like, this is the best way to describe it, is like it's a very homey feeling.
Yeah, there's a sense of pride too. I mean,
Hmm.
I met people that were like, you know, running a zip line, and there was no like, you know, you go to a spot in the US and someone's job is to run the zip line, and maybe they are like in high school or whatever, and they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever, this is just a job. this isn't like a high status thing. I want to be a
Yeah.
TikTok influencer. This is
Yeah.
just like small potatoes, you know?
Yeah.
But I would meet these people and they're like, no, this is great. Like yeah, I'm not like a famous person, but this job has its own sense of pride and value. And I think that, what I experienced was a really strong sense of like the good form of nationalism, like positive nationalism, and that like people are really proud to be Costa Rican. And with that comes this kind of quiet confidence and acceptance of like, yeah, you're coming to visit my country, but I'm welcoming you in. It's not that you're like coming and, like taking advantage of the country, or I think Costa Rica has done a really good job as a tourist destination of making sure that the fact that it is a tourist place is not that's a sustainable thing, that it's not like just an extraction based system,
Yeah. Yeah, you're very right. That's super true. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, are there any other things like that you would like for someone who's maybe thinking about doing a volunteer program or becoming an intern? Is there anything else that you would, any advice or anything that you think people should know before they make that decision?
No, I mean, definitely be aware of the environment that you're coming to. We are I mean, the good thing with where we are, or Costa Rica in general, is that you can be in the jungle, but not living like completely isolated. So like where we are right now, we're on the top of a mountain or like a very steep hill. And we are literally there's jungle everywhere. There's wildlife that's crossing through, but you can drive for 10 minutes and you're in the next town. You can go to the supermarket. So there is this good balance between really wild stuff, but also like the necessities we need for our modern day life. But with that being said, we do have snakes and spiders and mosquitoes everywhere.
Yeah.
So a lot of people that come here, um, I don't know, maybe they're not like completely aware that is very different to what you're used to at home, especially with regards to the bugs. So definitely like training, if you're someone that's scared of spiders, like get ready to see a lot of them, they're and the majority of people will not, like, if they see a snake, they are not going to kill it. They can move it very safely and put it away, but we don't want to kind of interfere. And that's the beautiful thing of this place, is the majority of locals have this immense respect for wildlife and nature around them, and they also know so much about it. So yeah, it's just like funny for me being here. Like a lot of people will come to me and say, "Oh, I'm allergic to mud." I'm like, well, I just like sometimes I just never know what to say, because like
Yeah.
it rains a lot, so that's going to be a bit difficult. But yeah, just definitely be aware of kind of the environment you're getting in, but also the majority of people kind of come here and go away with and that's also why I've stayed. It's not because of the amazing pay I get over here. It's because of course you're working with animals, but it's just the lifestyle, the life. You get to go after work, and just sit by a beach where there's literally nobody else around you, which is something very unusual in this day and age. So yeah, be kind of prepared to experience something that's really wonderful and very different to what we're all used to probably from back at homes.
Yeah, I was struck by, as I was traveling through the country, this kind of speaks to one of the things you mentioned earlier in the conversation. Being in this tropical climate, it's like you're kind of witnessing the land itself digesting everything.
Yeah.
Like you put up a sign, you put up a bus stop or a building, and from day one, like the earth itself is like starting to break it down, starting to digest it. It's like being in a
Yeah.
giant stomach,
Oh my God, it's so I've gone through so many shoes being here. Just the humidity just ruins everything.
Yeah.
Like technology, my laptop is like in a rave. There's like a bunch of colorful lines across it. So it's definitely like it's a hard place to live in. I mean, like harsh in terms of the elements, but if you're like smart with how you treat certain things, then you're good.
Yeah, I think it also again influences, the way that we all think, being in this place that's constantly in a state of change, that's everything's being constantly renewed and digested and regurgitated. And, that cycle is very present. And I became aware, after I was there for a month, but just like how that ceaseless cycle of change is also a beautiful, has a beautiful effect on the mind. And it's such a beautiful place to come and make changes in your life. And, I found that it was given that every time I go to the tropics, and this was no exception, I do become a different person, even in as short as a couple weeks or a month. It's this beautiful place to go and kind of renew your energy or your essence. I think a lot of people find value in that.
Yeah, for sure. That's very true.
Has working there, I know you have a couple little doggies I'm always seeing on your Instagram. Has working there like kind of changed in your mind what it means to have pets and your relationship with your animals? Has that changed at all since coming to work there?
I mean, we've always had dogs at home, but it's definitely nice to have, because over here, like I said, we're very like, we don't touch the animals, you don't handle them, so it's very strict. Like you're around animals all the time, but you don't have any contact with them, it's great. So it's good to have a dog because you can go home and like give all your love and all your attention to her and actually like pick her up. And but it's also like an amazing place to have an animal, a pet, because they're so free and independent. Like my dog, when I used to live in Dominical before, she would just like walk by herself to the river, go with her friends to the beach. Like they have such a cool, independent life. They don't have to be on a leash and controlled. And that also, as if you're like, a dog owner or a pet owner, that brings you also joy to be able to see your dog running like crazy on the beach and not having to control them. So yeah.
Yeah, I had a hippie dog growing up too. We'd take him to this little beach town and he'd just get to run wild and
exactly
eat food off the ground and, just get to be a dog. And he was always super happy when we would come back from that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate, I know you're busy. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. This was great.
Yeah. I want to just end it with, all my guests, I ask, if you want to be contacted, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you? Maybe if someone's heard this conversation, they're like, oh my God, I want to go do that. What's the best way that they can, start that process? What's the way that people get in contact?
Yeah, I mean, for volunteering, interning, the best way is visiting our website. It's Alturas Wildlife Sanctuary.org, and there we have all the information about the different programs we offer. There's if you want to volunteer, the first step is to fill out an application. There's lots of pictures and videos. You can also follow us on our Instagram. I'm trying to keep it updated whenever time allows me to, but we post a lot of videos and stories also about the work we're doing, the animals we're releasing, and just also like the things we have to deal with that a lot of people don't even consider when you're working with animals. So I'd say, definitely check out our website and visit us on Instagram. And I'm also managing the Instagram, so I'm trying to answer any messages or anything pretty quickly.
What's the Instagram handle?
Alturas Wildlife.
Okay. I'll put the links in the show descriptions. If anybody listening, wants to access that, I'll make sure that information is handy.
Yeah. And really we have a pretty good response rate. Like there's always somebody checking in emails every 1 to 2 days. So we usually answer any inquiries pretty quickly.
Awesome. Well, hey, again, really appreciate you coming on. And
thank you for having me.
Good seeing your face again. And
yes, same, likewise.
I know I look probably way different than when you
less tanned for sure.
Less hair in general too, sure.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I had nipple length hair the last time.
Yeah.
The beard. Well, thank you so much, Cristina. This has been great. all the best to you. I know a couple people already that I'm going to be sending your way. So
Awesome. Thank you.
maybe they can come and volunteer and get to experience
For sure,
Alturas.
that would be great. We always want new, different, diverse people. That would be awesome.
Awesome. Well, have a great day and
You too.
best of luck down in Dominical.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day. We'll keep in contact.